again. Got a little bit of game time decision fight announcements for you. Rafael dos Anjos is supposed to be fighting Rafael Fiziev in the co-main event. Fiziev came down with COVID, wasn't able to take the fight. They were looking for short notice replacements. I heard early on Islam Makhachev got in on Twitter and said he wanted the fight. People were wanting maybe Arman Saryukian to take the fight. It ended up being Renato Moicano. Now, the fight happened. It was booked, a few hours ago. So way after I did all these notes and everything. So the co-main event of what I did was Edson Barbosa, Bryce Mitchell. But keep in mind here that the co-main event is going to be Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. Main card kicks off UFC 272. Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Spivak is 13-3, 4-3 in the UFC. Lost his last fight via TKO to Tom Aspinall. His other two UFC losses are to Walt Harris and Marcin Tybura. He's got UFC wins over Alexei Oleinik, Jared Vandeera, Carlos Felipe, and Tai Tuivasa in Tai Tuivasa's first run in the UFC. He's got finishes in 11 of his 13 wins, 6 by submission, 5 by knockout. He's never been submitted in his career, and he's lost 2 out of 3 of his fights. 2 out of 3 of his losses via knockout. He's fought. He also has a win over Travis Fulton in 2017. Travis Fulton is a pioneer of mixed martial arts. He has over 300 bouts, professional mixed martial arts bouts in his career. So true pioneer. Spivak beat him in 2017. Greg Hardy coming into this fight, Spivak doesn't look good because he's 13-3. 2 out of 3 of those lost via knockout. Greg Hardy, pretty much the only thing he's got going for him is power in his strikes and in his kicks and his punches. And, that's what we've seen been able to defeat Spivak. So Hardy's also coming to this fight with a 2-inch height and a 2-inch reach advantage over Sergey Spivak. Hardy is 7-4-1 as a professional, 4-4-1 in the UFC. His only wins are over Maurice Green, who I don't think is in the UFC anymore, and if he is, he's the only one. Yorgan De Castro, not in the UFC. Juan Adams, not in the UFC. And Dmitry Smolikov, who got cut from the UFC right after his fight with Greg Hardy. 6 out of 7 of his wins via knockout. 2 out of 4 of his losses are via knockout. We know his debut was the DQ for the illegal knee against Alan Crowder in a fight that he looked like he was winning. And then we all know about the Ben Sassoli debacle in 2019 where, again, he won that fight, but he used his inhaler in between rounds, I think the second or third round or something like that. And that's a no-no. They let it slide. They were kind of weird about it. I guess Greg Hardy kind of tried to get permission from somebody on site. But, with something like that, you're definitely going to want to ask permission ahead of time, to doctors, UFC staff, whoever, way ahead of your fight so going into the fight. But he decided to make it last second. He used his inhaler in the round. And although he won the fight via decision, I think they called that one a no contest. So that's why Greg Hardy's record is the way it is. He should be 6-3. He should be 6-3 in the UFC, which would make him 9-3 overall. But it is what it is. That's what he's looking like. Sergey Spivak, I think, has a better ground game than Greg Hardy. I don't know if he'll be able to get him there, but I also like his striking a little bit better than Greg Hardy's striking. I think he's a lot more technically sound. He's been fighting for way longer than Greg Hardy has, so I got Sergey Spivak there. Kevin Holland making his welterweight debut against Alex Oliveira, or his return to welterweight, I should say. His last win was a knockout over Jacare Souza, UFC 256 in 2020. So almost 2 years ago was his last win. He lost 2 decisions back-to-back after that against Derek Brunson and Marvin Vittori. And then, of course, his last fight was a no contest, fight that ended in a no contest due to an accidental headbutt against Kyle Daukaus. He is 21-7-1 as a professional, 8-4-1 in the UFC. His only other UFC losses are against Brendan Allen and Thiago Santos. Santos, of course, is his UFC debut. He took on short notice after the Contender Series. He's got 12 wins by knockout, never been knocked out in his professional career, tied for the most wins in a calendar year with 5. And that was 2020, which 2020 was a short year. They had I want to say 2 months or so, a month and a half to 2 months, where there was no UFC at all. So we're talking about, instead of a 12-month period, we're talking about a 10-month period, 9 to 10-month period, where he tied for the most fights in a year. He's coming into this fight with a 3-inch height and a 5-inch reach advantage over Oliveira. Oliveira seems like he's got a better ground game, jiu-jitsu wise, but he does like to strike a little bit more than he likes to grapple. And yeah, so I think he's going to try to strike with Kevin Holland, which is going to be a no-no. Oliveira's 22-11-1-2 as his record, a professional record, 11-9-1 in the UFC. He's currently on a 3-fight losing streak right now. He got submitted by Shavkat Rakhmonov and Randy Brown and lost a decision to Nico Price in October. He's only been knocked out in one of his losses, and that was against Yancy Medeiros at UFC 218 in 2017. He's 2-6 in his last 8 fights, with the only wins being decision win over Peter Sabata and a split decision win over Max Griffin. 12 wins by knockout, and he is 5-6 by submission. So we talked a little bit earlier about how good he is at his grappling and good at jiu-jitsu. But like I said, he's been going back to the well of striking a little bit more, just because he's kind of back and forth iffy with his submission skills. He's not really, he's not like a Bryce Mitchell or Ryan Hall or somebody like that who's really, really dominant with their jiu-jitsu. He's definitely a brawler, and I don't think that's going to pan out well with Kevin Holland. I think Kevin Holland's going to pick him apart. And honestly, Alex Oliveira might be on his way out of the UFC if he loses to Kevin Holland. So we'll see. I got Kevin Holland. Edson Barbosa versus Bryce Mitchell. What I thought at the time was going to be a co-main event. It is not. It is probably going to be the third to last fight of the night. Barbosa is 22-10, 13 wins by knockout. He lost his most recent fight via TKO to Giga Chikadze. He's 3-5 since 2018, with his only wins being against Shane Burgos, Makwan Americani, and then Dan Hooker. He's got a doctor stoppage loss to Kevin Lee back in the day. We're going to go over through his losses really quick. Some of these 5 losses. He's got the doctor stoppage back there, dude. It's right there. Look, it's right there. Look right there. God, damn, silly ass nigga. He got doctor stoppage loss against Kevin Lee. He went to war with Dan Hooker for 4 rounds. He got knocked out by Justin Gaethje. He went to 3-round wars with Paul Feldner and Dan Ige. Dan Ige won fight of the night. And then he also had a long fought wars with Shane Burgos and Giga Chikadze, where he looked battered after both of those fights. So that's 6 fights. 7 fights where he took a substantial amount of damage, and those were recent. These are 7 out of his 8 most recent fights. He took a shit ton of damage. He's not old. He's like 35, 36 years old, so he's not crazy old, but he has taken a lot of damage in his most recent fights. He's a black belt in Taekwondo and a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu under Ricardo Almeida. He's 1-2 by submission, and he's coming into this fight with a 2-inch height and a 5-inch reach advantage over Bryce Mitchell, who is a black belt jiu-jitsu, way more qualified on the ground. He's 14-0 with 9 wins by submission and 5 wins by decision. He's 5-0 in the UFC, and his UFC wins include Tyler Diamond, Bobby Moffitt, Matt Sales, Charles Rosa, and Andre Feely. He only submitted one of those guys, and that was Matt Sales by twister, which is one of the most I think electrifying submissions that you could ever put somebody in the UFC. He's a really dominant grappler. It depends on if he can get the fight to the ground, because if Edson Barbosa can keep this fight standing and just box with him, Bryce Mitchell's going to have a long night. And I think this is going to be the underdog pick that I choose. Edson Barbosa is always dangerous standing up, and Bryce Mitchell has got to fight and work to get him onto the ground, and we'll see if that plans out for him. But I'm going to go underdog here, Edson Barbosa. Colby Covington, George Masvidal. I think we all know what's going to happen in this fight. It's going to be very boring. Colby Covington's going to wrestle him to death. Colby Covington is 16-3. Those 3 losses are to Kamaru Usman twice for the welterweight title, and then Warlley Alves in his 4th UFC fight. He's got key UFC wins over Tyron Woodley, Robbie Lawler, Rafael dos Anjos, and then Damian Maia. He's finished 50% of his wins with 4 submissions and 4 knockouts. Only 3 of those finishes were in his 12 UFC fights. And he is a former Division I All-American, 2-time Pac-10 Conference champ in 2010 and 2011. And he won gold medal in no-gi jiu-jitsu in Worlds in 2013. Masvidal, 35-15, pioneer of the sport. Not as much of a pioneer as Travis Fulton, but definitely still a veteran of the sport. Been in the UFC since 2013. Before that, he was in Strikeforce, which was bought out by the UFC. His biggest UFC wins are over Nate Diaz, Ben Askren, Darren Till, Donald Cerrone, James Krause, Michael Chiesa. He's on a 2-fight losing streak right now, losing a decision to Usman for the title on short notice, then getting a full camp and getting knocked out by Usman the following fight. He's got 16 wins by knockout, and he's only been finished in 4 out of his 15 losses. He's got the fastest knockout in UFC history at 5 seconds. And he's one of those exciting guys where here's what I'm going to say. I will gain a lot of respect for Colby Covington if he does what he did in the Kamaru Usman fight, and it's a little bit different stories because in the Kamaru Usman fight, he knew that he was neutralized in the grappling. He knew that Kamaru Usman either had better or the same amount of skill set in grappling as he did. So he struck with him. It was a complete kickboxing match, and it was really fun to watch. Is he going to do that with Masvidal? I don't know, because he's light years ahead of Masvidal grappling. So the smartest decision for him would be to wrestle Masvidal, get him tired, and then fuck him up in the later rounds. But like I said, I will gain a lot of respect for Colby Covington if he decides to say fuck that, fuck the grappling, and tries to kickbox with George Masvidal, same way he did Kamaru Usman. If that happens, he probably gets flatlined, but I don't see that happening. I see Colby Covington wrestling him from Jump Street, getting him tired. The more tired he gets, the easier the takedowns become. And that's that. So Colby Covington for me in the main event, just to play it safe. The prelims pan out. Jalen Turner, Jamie Malarkey will be, I think, headlining the prelims. Marina Rodriguez versus Yan Xiaonan. I don't know how to say XZ in Chinese. I don't know. Nicolette Nugamarinu versus Kennedy Nzwichi. Myra Moros versus Marina Agapova. Brian Kelleher coming in at a plus 500 underdog against Umar Nurmagomedov. Devontae Smith will be taking on Ludvut Klein. Tim Elliott going against Tigir Ulanbekov. Michelle Olajesic versus Dustin Jacoby. And then I wrote down the little notes that we had about RDA versus Nacho Moicano going to be the co-main event. Because when I was taking notes, I think they were circulating. It was probably going to happen. I've seen a couple of rumors here and there. So I wrote down, this might be happening. The Saryukian thing, the Makachev thing, Shizev dropping out. I just put question marks next to Moicano just to see what was going to happen throughout the day. But it is final. 5 days notice. Renato Moicano is fighting Rafael dos Anjos this Saturday. Next Tuesday, come back. We will be previewing UFC Vegas 50, I think is the number here. If I'm not mistaken, Thiago Santos versus Magomed Ankalaev. Marlon Rice versus Song Yadong. Sadiq Youssef versus Alex Caceres. Khalil Roundtree versus Carl Robinson is going to be a crazy good kickboxing match. Jillian Robinson fighting on that card. Who else we got here? That's a decent card. Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva is going to be off the fucking chain. That's going to kick off the main card. So holla at us next Tuesday. Stay barbecue. You guys know what it is. Colby Covington, you're a fucking nerd. Stand up with my boy Street Judas or Street Jesus, whatever you want to call him. And let's see what happens. Holla at me.